Hi everyone, so what I want to talk to you about today is about not being heard and when we need to be persistent. So this not being heard belief can form in us from a very young age. So for me, it was the time where when I was 8 years old, I actually saved my family's life. So to cut a long story short, there was a carbon monoxide leak in the caravan we were staying on holiday. And I knew in my sensitive superpowers, in my psychic gifts, that something was wrong and we shouldn't go to bed that night. So as an 8-year-old child, I didn't know what that was. And a lot of children are very connected to their bodies and know what their bodies are telling them and know those feelings. So for me, it was loud and clear. It was, don't go to sleep. And so I screamed and I screamed and I screamed, and I tried to get that voice across to my parents to say, we mustn't go to bed, we mustn't go to sleep, it's not safe. I can remember screaming and saying it's not safe. And eventually my parents listened to me and got someone out to come and have a look and to check the caravan over, who confirmed that I was right and that I did have some kind of gifts and that I had saved everybody's life. So the belief that I formed from that experience was that I'm not heard, and that's from spending 2 hours screaming, I'm not heard, I'm not heard, I know this and I'm not heard. What I hadn't actually consciously and subconsciously realised was that I was eventually heard, and that I did save my family, and that I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't been heard. But what I had taken, and the shadow of this experience, so as you know, I talk a lot about shadow work, the shadow of this experience that I took away was that I'm not heard and that I'm not good enough, because it took 2 hours of me screaming to finally be heard. But the truth is that I was heard, and I did persist. I did persist for 2 hours because of that inner knowing. Now, this not heardness can then start to play out in all areas of our lives. So when I was in my 15-year corporate career in financial services, I had, I had studied positive psychology, and I was starting to see the shifts it was having on my life. And I started to do positive psychology experiments, and that was starting to have a shift on the people in the organisations. But that was people that were coming forward and that were volunteering and that were hearing me. So again, I was being heard. I did have this tribe of people who were coming on board and were volunteering to take part in my experiments. But trying to get positive psychology into the organisation at that higher level, and trying to influence the training programs and the leadership programs to put positive psychology at the core of them, and to get positive psychology into the well-being practices at the time, was very difficult, and I felt very, very not heard, and it was playing on this wound. And again, what did happen in the end was I through kind of building up that tribe of people, and through the right people hearing me, we did make some great shifts and changes, and I was able to publish the results of my study, which I talk about in my TEDx, which was from 180 people that were part of that organisation that I did that study on. So the truth is, I was heard, but we start to make all of these stories and beliefs, and what is really key, and what I've learned in this experience, is that we do need to persist. We do need to persist. Now, we hear a lot around, and I'm guilty of this as well, following what's light is right, what feels expansive in our body, what feels constrictive. And I just want to say here, there is a difference between lightness and constricted, and us feeling like we're not heard and needing to persist with something, okay? So we can still feel that something is light. So if I tune in with my body and say, body, do I want to continue to spread ripples about positive psychology and energy to the world? That feels light and expansive. That is my outcome. That is my ultimate aim. But I may have to persist to do that, because my experience has been that a lot of, and this is the beauty of working with tools like positive psychology, which we do in the quantum alignment program, is that a lot of the time we are on the back foot. So our organizations, any structure you can think of in the world is operating off of a fight or flight mode. Let's look for what's wrong and fix it. Medicine, let's look for what's wrong and let's try and fix it. Instead of, when we flip it to what's working well, what are the strengths in this scenario, this is where these practices come in. So slightly gone off on a tangent there, but my point being that it feels light for me to continue to show up on my mission and share my message with the world, even if I have to persist to get there. And this was the same for me with my business as well. So I was told, in the early days, just run your mindfulness courses, because that's the thing that you've got that works, and don't do all this other stuff. That's all, that's all too much. And that fueled that I'm not being heard. And for quite a few months, actually, all I did was sell my mindfulness courses. I didn't help any clients using positive psychology, my coaching skills, the energy work. It was all kind of pushed down and dulled down, because I inherently had that belief that I'm just not heard. I'm not heard, even when, and I've collected, is that the word? I've received numerous testimonials saying how I have shifted people's lives and businesses. You can see them on my testimonials page. But even then, I was like, all of these people are saying these incredible things. Why is the rest of the world not hearing me? Why is the rest of the world not seeing how I can shift and change lives? And this would really frustrate me, having these incredible testimonials and not being heard. And in the past, this has meant, I've launched a program that I know can completely and utterly shift people's lives and bring them massive abundance, bring them shifts in their relationships. And I've had 0 launches. But what I have been shown is that I need to persist. And when we have this message, when we have this mission, we become almost so absorbed in our mission that we think we get it. It makes sense. Everyone else around us must get this stuff. Like, why am I not being heard? But we really do need to go above and beyond. So I think I saw somewhere that we need to repeat something 7 times for someone to even hear us. So we do need to persist. This is psychologically, we need to persist, because of the way that the brains work and because a lot of people are on the back foot. And this has certainly been my experience with positive psychology in particular, because people love to operate from that threat space, love to operate in that victim mentality mode instead of in that empowering place, until we have that awareness and we start to practice that. So it can be really hard when we are a bit rebellious and we are these sensitive leaders in the new paradigm, for us to be heard in what we're doing. So my message to you today is to persist. And I've had this evidence with what happened to me as a child. It wasn't that I wasn't heard, I was heard, but I had to persist to get my voice out there and get that message across, which ultimately saved my family. It saved my life. I would not be here today. I would not have done a TEDx. That probably fueled my TEDx, because it was like, I've got all this stuff. You can see my drawing cartoon behind me from it. I've got all this stuff and I want to get it out there, and I've done this experiment, I've proven that it worked, but I'm not being heard. Like, I need to shout this stuff from the rooftops. I need to get on stage. And the last thing I wanted to leave you with as well is that, unfortunately, it is a bit of a fight between light and dark in the world, and that is just reality. That is where we are at as a planet at the moment. And, I always say, I'm a lover, not a fighter. I don't want to get into fight energy. The reality is it can be a bit of a fight, but we can do it in a way, and we can be heard in a way that's really heart-centered, because the word courage comes from cœur, which means heart in French. And this is something Brene Brown talks about as well. And we can be heard and we can fight with love from that heart-centered space. And we need to be brave, we need to be courageous, and if we're on a mission to change the world, we have to keep showing up, we have to keep sharing that message, and we have to persist, and we will be heard by the right people. Any questions, let me know.